Why not just give them Zelda-style subtitles? Characters and stories don't carry over. It would have been way better than this silly-ass number 16.
Ready?
What do you think?
Since I was a grubby little child, Square Enix has always had a weird hold over all of my interests. It started when I booted up the PS1 Pizza Hut demo disc and started playing Final Fantasy VIII, got my ass kicked, had no idea what I was doing, and proceeded to turn it off. Then I played Crash Team Racing and Ape Escape like a proper stupid child and forgot all about Final Fantasy. Then Kingdom Hearts came out and I was like, hey, that's pretty good. While games like Dragon Quest and even the sacred Legend of Zelda came beforehand, nothing quite popularized RPGs, especially in the West, like Final Fantasy in 1988. Made by Square and directed by Hironobu Sakaguchi, its astounding impact on gaming is totally self-evident. I don't need to sit here and explain the different colors of mages for you to get the idea. Final Fantasies 6, 7, 8, 10, 14. Hell, let's go Chrono Trigger, Legend of Mana, even modern Tomb Raider, Kingdom, Ding Dang, Hearts. On June 22nd, 2023, Square Enix added Final Fantasy XVI to their illustrious catalog to mostly positive reviews. And am I the only one who just doesn't get it? Look at all these positive reviews that it's getting. Look at these scores. To a lot of completely well-intentioned people, this game is like a perfect 10 out of 10, way up here. But to me, and I think maybe a growing minority, the game is a little bit more down here-ish. Now, is that to say that this game is bad? No, not at all. This game is fine. It's totally fine. But what I don't think it is a Final Fantasy game. I feel like I could just be ripping off Neko Jaco right now, sitting on a yoga ball, talking about how like Square Enix's game design has to change. But I don't really feel that way. Hell, Square Enix changes their game design all the time. Sometimes it's resulted in the best games they've made in the series. But something is just wrong with Final Fantasy right now, and kind of Square Enix in general. It sort of feels like in the modern gaming world, they're starting to get left behind by some of their peers like Persona or the FromSoft games like Elden Ring, which I just spent 11 minutes ranting about. They used to be pioneers in this industry, bringing the idea of RPGs to gaming in the first place and revolutionizing with every new title. But Final Fantasy XVI? It ain't him. Square sort of seems like a classic rock band. They had banger after banger early on. Then they got into the 2000s and did some weird stuff, and man, I don't know what Square Enix and Final Fantasy even are anymore. And I don't think they do either. I do know it's starting to feel a lot like Game of Thrones.
And what exactly is that supposed to mean?
Let's start with some kudos. Final Fantasy XVI is directed by Hiroshi Takai of Saga, produced by Naoki Yoshida of Final Fantasy XIV acclaim, and primarily developed by Square Enix's Creative Business Unit 3, also of Final Fantasy XIV acclaim. All of these people are extremely talented, and making video games is like creating little miracles, so congrats to them for doing what you do. Thank you all. Final Fantasy XVI is all about Clive Rossfield and the medieval lands of Valisthea, a place ruled over by 5 powerful kingdoms and the Mother Crystals. War over the crystals defines Valisthea, and the icons that preside over the nations manifest direct power in dominance. Clive's journey consists of understanding if he even is a dominant, because his little brother Joshua is, but he isn't. But it turns out, oops, that's sort of not true. After his entire nation of Rosaria, that's where he's from, is overrun in a surprise attack by the Holy Empire of Sembrek, that's them here, we learn that Clive's mother Annabella betrayed their people. 2 time skips later, and now Clive is left to put back together the life that was taken from him through senseless political violence, and eventually confront the Mother Crystals and icons of the world themselves. So, pretty standard plot stuff for a Final Fantasy. You've got crystals, you've got the warring nations, you've got your summons, you've got a lot of attractive main characters that all look the fucking same. And Sid. Eat shit, Josh and Dion, you were nowhere near as likable. But we gotta talk about the dragon under the bed, because I'm sorry, this is sadder than the actual Game of Thrones. Just tell me if this sounds familiar.
We've got a kind-hearted noble outcast accompanied by a hound, whose family is destroyed by the most powerful and pompous family in the land, one whose son is a great leader in battle, and has some hidden extracurriculars going on, but ultimately chooses to spurn his family's decisions for power. Laced in between are a series of political squabbles, betrayals, seemingly unnecessary sexy time, large-scale battles, and a creepy monster from beyond the veil whose motives are mysterious and endgame implicating.
Oh yeah, and everyone talks like this.
You wound me, Jim. And what of our legions? Shall we raise the flag?
Look, I'm not going to be the one to tell Square that they can't emulate Game of Thrones. I mean, Final Fantasy stories fit that mold like a triangle in a square hole. Good enough. But what I do get frustrated by is when you try and emulate something that's good without using the thing that makes it great, which is its complex, interesting characters. Show, don't tell. I don't need the characters to sit down and explain the plot to me. Just let their reactions and their agency over the world dictate everything we need to know about who they are as characters. So Final Fantasy XVI just does not do this. Look, in this game that is approximately 30 hours long if you're doing the main quest and maybe a few side quests that interest you, only in that first 90 minutes do they set up the entire backstory for Clive and his family and all of that so that you understand what the characters are doing and why. It all hinges on 90 minutes. After that, Rosaria gets yeeted by the Empire, we get a 13-year time skip, and the game proper begins. But in that time, we miss everything that's important. 13 years of humiliation, slavery, pain, and all the characters that you wind up fighting against. Who is this guy? Why does he not like Sid? What kind of beef do they have? And heck, why didn't Clive know about it in all the time that he and Sid spent together? Hey, moreover, why is he banging this girl who's from a completely different nation? And you know what? Who is she? Does Clive actually know her? All these people are dominants, which means they're super important, but does Clive have any relationships with them? I don't know. Hey, I'll give you $1 million if you can tell me anything about this guy other than he's evil. Just tell me his name. Don't look it up. I know you're going to because I had to and I'm making the video. Also, what's Annabella's deal? Like, we know she wants to make some sort of demon lord who's gonna take back all of magic, but like, why? Is she just mad because Dion, our sweet little boy over here, is gay? Is he gay? Wait, maybe? I don't know. Hey, you know what? We should check the wiki. Oh, wait, there's one in-game. Good God, this whole thing is starting to feel like the Star Wars prequels. Everything these characters say and do is completely in service of explaining the plot to you. And don't get me wrong, the game tries. Joshua carrying the pain of Ultima within him and still directing the Undying. Cool, give me more. Sid defecting from the Waloed Kingdom after learning about the plot with Ultima and essentially creating villains in Benedicta and Hugo. That's neat. Can we see more of it, please? Or what about Clive, our main character? He blames himself for his brother's death and refuses to confront it for the 13 years of the time skip. In that time, he remains branded, a bearer, slave to the Holy Empire until he could free himself. That sounds really interesting and could lead to deep character development. I'd like to see more. This all makes sense on paper, but we didn't watch him suffer for 13 years. All we get is this.
Joshua died. I killed him, and I blamed another for what I did, to spare myself the guilt. I feared that by accepting it, I would lose what little was left of me. So I ran from everything.
No, you didn't run. You were enslaved. The game's whole story fails on one simple fact. We are thrown into the middle of this conflict without any sort of context. We learn so little about the Blight. We learn so little about the power players of every nation. We learn so little about the inner workings of our characters, and we get less and less time to do so the further the game goes along. To make up for it, the voice acting is admittedly pretty damn good. And I mean, especially from everyone, but also Clive, who is voiced by Ben Starr. Good lord, he's as attractive as his actual game character. He's doing a great job emoting and delivering these lines, but one great performance and even several great performances can't make up for missing character development. We just don't know these people. We could have understood who some of these people are that we don't meet until a quarter, halfway, 3/4 into the game that we're supposed to hate. Also, later on, you have to talk to Vivian, who is like your war counselor, so she can explain to you the different nations that you're about to fight against, the people who are in them, and why you're attacking the Crystal you are. Hey, guess what? Can I please just go do that instead of having her explain it to me? Everything you do in this game, even if you get the rare moments where you get real character development, is all just in service of getting you to the next story beat and having some action. But hey, speaking of action, Single-player Final Fantasy mainline games average about 8 to 9 playable characters. Understanding how to build a party is a massive component to overcoming the challenges of a world, whether it's trippy steampunk or hanging with the boys. You're going to need to think about character skills, party dynamics, and positioning, no matter if it's turn-based, ATB, or ACB. Some of these characters are optional. Several go on to be the most beloved characters in gaming. It's not quite Fire Emblem quantity, but overall demonstrates quality. Alright, so if we can expect anywhere between 8 to 9 characters to meet and use in Final Fantasy, let's go ahead and see what Final Fantasy XVI has in terms of characters to— It's just Clive! You don't play as any other characters. There is no party screen. Despite the fact that Jill and Sid frequently join you in combat, you never once upgrade their abilities, see their gear, unlock anything. What is the point of putting them in the story? Just why? Oh, you thought you could have a diverse group of heroes to fight with?
Wrong, sir.
What, and all because the story says that this is in service of making Clive the British Avatar? Even Final Fantasy XIII's linear ass still gives you a party to play with. Why did you guys think you were making God of War? Because Clive is the only character you play as, that Joshua sequence doesn't count, combat becomes all about you. Jill, Sid, Torgal, anyone else? We do not care. There are no health bars. Your friends can't die in combat. But hey, at least if there's unique fighting experiences, then it makes up for it and you have a great time, right? No, you don't even get those. Look, I'm not going to discount Ryota Suzuki's work on combat design. It is extremely well notably highlighted by Devil May Cry 5. And that's sort of what Final Fantasy XVI feels like. You mash the attack button, you have lots of fluid movement, and there's tons of opportunity for combos. All that exists. It's not unlike Kingdom Hearts or Final Fantasy 15, which still allows for lots of high-octane fun. But most encounters in the main story are painfully easy and repetitive. Mash, flavor damage, stagger enemies that even have a stagger bar, earth, wind, fire, dancing in September, lightning, light, ice, darkness. Guardian. So many elemental abilities for enemies that don't even have elemental weaknesses. At least not as far as is notable if they even exist. So once you find a move or two from 3 different elements that you like and you bother upgrading, you never have to change them other than for poops and giggles. Standard combat, I hope is clear, just kind of sucks. The icon fights, on the other hand, are pretty fucking awesome, my dude. Now, I wouldn't call them mechanically interesting, but these kaiju, Evangelion, God of War-ass fight sequences are at least visually impressive, and they really match the overall narrative-driven experience that gives you this sort of story. I mean, every story beat, for the most part, like a boss fight, ends in an icon fight, which, adds to the overall disappointment. But you know what? They're still really cool, and I enjoy looking at them. Though, and also, if I could just touch on the music for a little bit, I think it's really distracting that in the middle of this high fantasy setting with tons of scores that are orchestral, lush, sweeping, all these horns and strings, some of the boss fights take you out of it, and they sound like this. See, that's dope, but distracting. Look, there's a lot of reused music in the menus and bland stuff while traversing the world, but there are some absolute bangers in this soundtrack, and I fully suggest you go check it out independent of the game. The big problem here is that this massive departure from like a mainline Final Fantasy game, at least in terms of its combat, means that this is effectively no longer an RPG, which is what Square Enix did in the first place. Square Enix's metaphorical rock band is clearly in its greatest hit sequence. I mean, this game is basically just titled, now that's what I call Final Fantasy Volume 16. And I think they're really aware of that, because Final Fantasy 16 was developed by Creative Business Unit 3, and their focus is on, quote, developing the Final Fantasy MMORPG and the Dragon Quest Builder games. Well, okay, let's look at the top of the business pyramid. Let's look at Creative Business Unit 1, because their focus is primarily on, quote, the mainline Final Fantasy games, which actually means Final Fantasy VII Remake, Kingdom Hearts, and Final Fantasy spin-offs. Okay, I don't know how business works, so I don't want to harp on this too much because I'm going to sound like an idiot, but why did you give your mainline game that's supposed to be being made by Creative Business Unit 1 to the guys who make the MMORPG? Don't get me wrong. Final Fantasy XIV is apparently phenomenal. I'm not into it myself, but I understand that it's a good game and it's probably the best MMORPG in the world. So why did you have those guys make your single-player, narrative-driven, no choices allowed Final Fantasy XVI. Final Fantasy XVI feels like Devil May Cry's combat was shoved into a blender with an Uncharted game's narrative progression, sprinkled with Game of Thrones lore, and an MMO mission system. This analogous milkshake has lost all the individual flavors of its ingredients, resulting in a sludge you drink before a morning workout. The richness of each component, by themselves delicious, is gone. There is no uniqueness, just digestion. Throw in any extra crap you want. You won't taste it. Crafting materials, gil, XP, and renown. These are the 4 currencies of FF16, and there are lots of opportunities to get them. But I never needed to spend a single gil in this game on any potions, elixirs, weapons, armor, you name it. Hell, potions are found in the wild for free. Who needs XP for leveling up when all of the enemies are pancake easy, even on the most difficult game version that's available in the first playthrough? Crafting materials that you get, and they are everywhere, are basically made obsolete an hour later because the game just gives you a free piece of material that levels you up to the next weapon. So like, why should I go and get more weapons when things are so easy? Where is the value in this game? It's supposed to be in the side quests. Yeah, that still didn't happen here. Unless you really want all the weapons and armor, and I mean, why would you? There's not even like a PlayStation trophy for it. There has to be something fun in the side quests for you to enjoy in this game, right? Right?
Wrong!
Final Fantasy XVI has approximately 76 unique side quests, 7 chronolith trials, and 32 hunt trials, all endeavors designed to do one thing: give you more stuff. Every last one gives you some combination of the aforementioned currencies or even unique recipes to make special armor and weapons. Ooh, that could have been fun.
If I felt like it.
Chronolith and Hunt Trials, I'm not even going to bother talking about because the rewards for them are just upgrades to your attack abilities or equipment recipes in exchange for fighting. Some of the hunt bosses are good and challenging, you might say, and those monster designs are more evocative of Final Fantasy. And look, I agree. Some of them are fun, but when you've only unlocked the ability to do them at like the 15-hour mark of the game, and every random side quest or errand you've been sent on already is mid as fuck, what's driving me to do more? A trophy in Clive's bedroom?
Here, the torch, have a trophy.
A good side quest should do one of 3 things: teach you something interesting about the world, give you something really cool to fight, explore, collect, show your characters in a light that is completely different than fighting the big main bad guys so you learn something about them. Final Fantasy XVI functionally does all of these things, but all of them are done to an underwhelming effect. Look, Clive's defining feature as a character is that he wants to be a good leader for his people. It's a very noble quality. He wants a better future for the world because he's so tired of the blight, he's tired of the bearers, he's tired of the icons and the crystals and the magic, and all he wants more than anything in the world is to make the world a better place, because he's really written with a lot of empathy and compassion. A lot of these characters are. I mean, hell, there's a point later in the game where basically they're branded as terrorists because of what they did at one of the crystals, and people are talking about them like they're criminals, but they go out of their way to help people anyway because that's the right thing to do, because that's what a leader does. I'm so on board with this premise. It's exactly what Final Fantasy is good at.
But oh my god, these fucking side quests!
76 total, and damn near every single one boils down to, hey, run a quick errand, go stab these generic enemies, go talk to this annoying guy, or multiple guys. A few go out of their way to say, hey, answer a silly riddle, or hey, actually go kill this creature and then go visit your father's grave. This is like a real side quest. You know what these needless fetch quests remind me of? The ones where their mouths are barely moving, like it's Kingdom Hearts 1, and the voice acting feels tacked on and stiff. Why, it reminds me of World of Warcraft and other MMOs. Huh. But that's a totally different genre. I wonder why Final Fantasy XVI is like, oh god, it's back! MMORPGs are fun because you get to create a community with your friends and go fight interesting monsters in a tactical raid, building your status in the online space. It's not because of fetch quests that level you up some more, or even the story most of the time. So why'd you throw a bunch of random fetch quest bullshit into this single-player narrative-driven game? Why is this whole thing so linear that Nathan Drake would be embarrassed? What in the world convinced you to steal all of Game of Thrones plot lines and aesthetic right down to the fucking ending? If you know, you know. Most importantly, why are you so actively looking for feedback and defending the sales numbers of this game even after Final Fantasy's 15 and 7 remake have dramatically outsold it? And I mean, in the middle of me making this, they released articles saying, yeah, it underperformed. Looking for feedback in an MMO makes a lot of sense. The whole thing is meant to serve the players, and it's meant to give them a world that they can explore. But what are you gonna do in a single player game? The only thing you can do is release DLC, which, from the rumors that I've seen, are basically gonna be about Cid's backstory. Gee, that would have been really cool to just put in the damn game. Look, Square didn't put out a public questionnaire in Japan because they have big plans for this game. It's been in development for 7 freaking years, and I know COVID stopped a little bit of that, so I mean, I'm giving some allowances. Fans have been clamoring for remakes of 9, 10, and waiting for the next part of Final Fantasy 7 remake to get made. I mean, the Nvidia leak caused more excitement than 16 ever did. No. Final Fantasy's lack of identity, weird mashup of mechanics, and admittedly underwhelming story really point to one dramatic problem. Back in 1987, Square revolutionized the game industry by demonstrating that you could play a story however you wanted to at a time when video games were still young. As Kawazu Akitoshi put it when talking about the original, the fun in an RPG begins when you create a character. I didn't feel the need to have a suggested party at the beginning for clearing the game. I wanted people to be all black mages or all warriors if they wanted. But back then, in those days, people didn't think that deeply about that kind of thing. Later on in 1997, they demolished the industry again with Final Fantasy VII and showed that big cinematic stories with larger-than-life characters could be brought to life in games while still leaning on a robust battle system. My beautiful boy Tetsuya Nomura said about the iconic Aerith death scene, "With the plot, I wanted people to feel something intense, to understand something. I was frustrated with the perennial dramatic cliche where the protagonist loves someone very much and so has to sacrifice himself and die in a dramatic fashion in order to express that love. I wanted to say something different." And then again in 2013, when Final Fantasy XIV was relaunched, they proved that they're dedicated to their players. Square did everything to fix 14, with Naoki Yoshida saying, "There was the value of Final Fantasy in my mind, especially an officially numbered Final Fantasy title, and the latest trends in MMORPGs. I thought that we needed a title in our line that put those two concepts together. We lost all customer trust with the seeds we had sown ourselves, and my take was that this is the cost for making up for that. You can't get trust back overnight, and it's not something you can buy back either. You can only become friends again by showing you've changed and sustaining that change." Final Fantasy and its creators have consistently demonstrated a level of forward thinking and love of the medium by consistently creating games that challenge gamers, all while weaving together these beautiful stories and combat that suit the genre that they're making. Clive is genuinely a good character. I mean, Cid, Jill, Josh, Dion, there is a tremendous amount of potential here, and there's a good story to tell. The combat mechanics are stylish and cool and pretty easy to use, and the world of Valisthea and the stunning graphics that bring it to life are just wonderful, even if the world itself is a bit small. But when half of the plot points and the entire aesthetic of the game are ripped off from Game of Thrones, the combat system just feels like a slower derivative of Devil May Cry 5, and this beautiful world that has been brought to life is so limited in where you can go, even as a ruler, and have the agency over. What does all this amount to? It amounts to Final Fantasy XVI and Square in general feeling like one of these many useless side quests. Bland. Going through the motions and emulating days long past instead of trying to march forward to a brighter future. Now, again, is this game bad? No, it's fine. I'll remind you, it's totally fine. Is it even the worst mainline Final Fantasy game? I don't think that's fair. That's all subjective anyway, but there are so many, and this is probably better than like 2 and 4, whatever. But is this an all-time classic that fans will fondly remember and clamor for more of? I highly doubt it. Because when even Final Fantasy XV and especially Final Fantasy VII Remake are dramatically outselling 16, 14 is arguably the best MMORPG in the world, and Creative Business Unit 1 hasn't even worked on the mainline game since like possibly 2009 with 13? That doesn't speak to a whole lot of confidence in the future of this series. Final Fantasy has a very big problem with its own identity. It doesn't know if it wants to be an RPG that is underwhelming worlds or a bland action series that has underwhelming combat. And poor fan responses and weird sales numbers might just lead them to pull the plug entirely and focus on the MMO for the most part. Barring that, don't be surprised if we get like a Mega Man X style reboot of Final Fantasy where they go back and try and retell some of these stories through a completely different lens. It's honestly better than the alternative where they just start stealing from better games in the genre. Final Fantasy XVII, now with more Elden Ring. So hey, thanks for watching to the end of this nightmare. You should do all the YouTube stuff like subscribe and like, and hey, comment down below. Did you hate me for ranting about this game for way too long? Go ahead and tell me why you liked it. Or if you did think it was underwhelming, tell me, are you actually excited for Final Fantasy VII? Anyways, do the YouTube stuff. I guess. Thanks. Just be yourself.